Let go and let God. Now, that's a phrase I've heard since I was 14. Never thought much of it. I thought, that's kind of neat. A nice little saying, let go and let God. It wasn't until about 2 or 3 months ago that I started to take it to heart and started to actually do some of that stuff of letting it go. So much stuff swirling around in my head and so many things that you can't do anything but let it go and let God. And there's a sense of unburdening. At least I feel that way. Of letting go because there's nothing I can do with whatever I'm working through or whatever situation comes up. I can't do it myself, and I realize that. And being a person of faith, I know that Jesus is there to hold my burden and carry it for me, to resolve some things that I can't resolve on my own. The need for Jesus is great, even though sometimes I don't think it is. Sometimes I think I can do it on my own, but again and again I find that I can't. In this gospel lesson, Jesus sees the people, identifies their needs. Now, he's been speaking with them and healing them for a long time, and they've learned a lot, and they want more. And yet he realizes that when you're starving, when you're hungry, it's hard to concentrate. When you're distracted by hunger, you're not going to learn much. I know that from firsthand experience. And so he finds and addresses their physical needs as well. And yet, his disciples have doubts, have faith in what they have or what they lack. And here they find a boy among the crowd who has a few things. Maybe he's going home to feed his family or his extended family. His sense of family is probably bigger than our sense of a nuclear family in that case. Could be like the natives where they have 12 people in one little area to live. Perhaps that's what it's like. So he was probably going home to feed his family with the few loaves and fish that he had. They didn't know what to do. We don't have enough money. What are we going to do now? And so in a sense, they let that go, and Jesus told them what they needed to do. Oftentimes, we don't know what to do next. And sometimes the best thing is to let it go and give it some time. Well, obviously, if it's an emergency situation, something has to be done. But if it's something that you can let lie for a while, sometimes it's best to let it lie for a while. We find that Jesus has the answer. Maybe not the one we expect. Maybe it's a whole different way of doing something. I'm thinking about my conversation that I had with Pastor Steve Jerby about a month ago. We meet for coffee once in a while because we started this whole first call together. And so the first call people got together for about 3 years and studied together and were together. And so I knew Steve from then. I know him from that. So we have coffee once in a while. And as we're talking, I noticed that all peoples will be taking Florist Avenue Church as part of a satellite church for all peoples. Florist Avenue, you may not know, has recently closed its doors. I asked Steve about that, and he said about 3 years ago, I sat down with the council, and I said, something is going to happen, I'm not sure what it is. But I know the Spirit is working somehow, but I'm not sure where it's leading us. And as time progressed, some things started to fall into place. Florist Avenue started to struggle even more. And he was approached by the Synod office saying, what might be kind of interesting is if all peoples had kind of like a satellite church for all peoples, another location. Maybe not the same kind of structure or the way it works, but it's got to be connected to all peoples in some way, shape, or form. And so as the years went on, it turned into something that Steve and the council could have never fathomed in a million years. God works strangely sometimes and creatively. There's an article I just found in the Lutheran magazine that's just came out, the August edition, is how to, what is the title of it? I'll find it here somewhere in my notes. Something about doing with our shrinking congregations, doing a different kind of ministry. And what we do about that, and how things look different for us. Doing more with less, basically is the title of it. Doing more with less, in ways we can't comprehend. I think that Jesus and the power of God often confuse and sometimes may even frustrate us because it's not kind of what we want, but it may turn out to be really good. Who would have known if you were in the 60s that a black man would be president now? You would have never thought of that before. Or maybe you have. You can think of a number of examples in which we have been kind of floored and things turn out differently than the way we thought. And yet we know the hand of God is guiding and leading us in our everyday lives, and how much we pay attention to that or how much we let go of that in our own concerns and our own drives and our own things that we want to accomplish. Jesus feeds the people. Jesus has the presence of God. In this particular gospel, out of all four that have this story, Jesus is the one who goes about and feeds the people. In the other gospels, he sends the disciples out, which is a powerful thing too. But in this case, we find that there's much grass, and we find that Jesus as the good shepherd to the sheep, metaphorically, people sitting on the grass, is going out and feeding the people. I'm sure it takes a while, but Jesus wants to do that. Jesus, as the presence of God in flesh, is there for them in more ways than one, meeting their emotional and spiritual needs, and yet being very aware of their physical needs too, their hunger, their pain, their need for healing from their physical ailments or what have you. Jesus is aware of our pain. Jesus is aware of our needs. And sometimes we don't realize what form that takes or how Jesus comes to us. We don't know what the future holds oftentimes. And yet, we know that the hand of God is there guiding us. The people of Israel, who were abused and oppressed by the Pharaoh in Egypt, knew that they needed to get out. And Moses was appointed by God to do that very thing. And I don't think they had in their mind what the future held. All they knew is that they needed to get out because it was becoming too extreme for them. So God led them out. 40 years wandering around, becoming a people of God slowly but surely through all faith and doubts and what have you, for all the mess-ups that they did, to bring them to the promised land, to become a more cohesive group of people, the family of God. They didn't know. They just relied on the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud and the sense of Moses giving them some directions, and later on the 10 Commandments as the guidelines for their lives as people of faith. Would have never known that from day one, but they knew and had a sense that their trust was in Moses, their trust more than likely was in God. And God did something with them they didn't expect, but creatively formed a people of God, a strong, cohesive group. In our lives, we don't know sometimes what's going to happen next. I called a friend of mine from Walker Tech, and I just to chat with him for a bit. It's been a couple years. And I found out that he's no longer owner or president of the company. He's a sales rep, full commission sales rep. And I asked him what happened. He said, well, it's kind of a convoluted story, and I can't give up details because of trust and issues like that. I said, okay. I've been floored by that ever since our conversation. I don't know how God is working through his life, and he doesn't know. But I think it's probably something that is a relief to him in some ways and stressful in other ways. As I remember watching him having 47,000 things coming at him, as any business owner does and realizes. The stress that he was under, the chest pains he had all the time, the lack of sleep, the gray hairs that popped out of his head. just being exhausted all the time. In the sense that God has given him a new direction, a new way of looking at things. Maybe he's doing something he loves, that part of his presidential occupation that he loved the most. We don't know where God is leading, but God is leading. And I have a sense if I call him in a few months that things might be settled down a bit for him. That he'll become more identified with who he is in terms of his sales rep status instead of president of the company for 20-some years and part owner of the company. He's leading out in faith. His family is leading out in faith. His kids are all grown and out of college and have jobs. Now is a transition time for he and his wife. We see that God always has something different and new for us. We don't know where Trinity Lutheran Church will be in 15 years. We come faithfully to worship. We take on projects that we feel that we can. We take on service projects that we feel that we can and are able to with our busy lives. And we do what we can as people of God. We don't know where the future is, and yet we're here, asking and seeking guidance, faithful and trusting that God will provide for us always. And that God has indeed, throughout the history, provided for us in every way imaginable. We read the stories in the book of faith called the Bible. And we see that God has never abandoned his people, yet has always come up with something creative and new for them. Even in Revelation, I have created a new thing, a new Jerusalem, a new city of God, a new people. So I'm the Alpha and Omega. We live into that faith, and as people of faith, we hold on to that dearly, that God is there for us. The presence of God is indeed out here feeding us individually with his love and his grace. Amen.